Hello again, everyone. This is Shawn here. I hope you are enjoying a good week and hoping to have a good 4th of July, Independence Day. Our country's 250th birthday is tomorrow. Happy birthday, USA. And, uh, and like I said before, like, share, comment, and subscribe, and don't mind all this. Just ignore all these posts. Don't mind that. Um, So today, everybody wants me to talk about either politics, sports, or in the Bible, and that's all good and well. In some people, for starters, politics. For me, politics is whoever is running this country it just needs to run it the right way, and that's what President Trump is trying to do right now. That's as far as I'm concerned. The politicians that we elected into government should listen to what the people need to say. And that's what we need to do. And I'm hoping that's what everybody can do. The one big concern is people just keep talking about politics. For me, I'm not that much of a politician or mind talking about politics. I don't mind. It's just I just don't want to talk about it all the time because it just gets irritating and boring from time to time about certain things and certain events and yada 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 and stuff like that. So I prefer not to do any of that kind of talking and that kind of going to details of politics and stuff like that because politics is just politics. And I hope you like, share, comment, and subscribe to this series. And I'm really hoping that people you understand that it is the most important thing to understand and how to get things going. But we all need to learn how to get along. Not just here in America, but around the world. We all need to be getting along because through all of our faiths, we are the our Father in Heaven's children, and we need to be friends to one another and help one another in times of need, especially when people really need us the most of all. That's as far as I'm concerned. Now, now I've been approached by my old high school football coach, Matt Lundeen, and he wants me to talk about some things here. Just let me get things here. For starters, he wants me to talk about the top 5 Vikings quarterbacks of all time and why. Then there are the top 5 Vikings running backs of all time and why. And the top 5 Vikings wide receivers of all time and why. And then the top 5 Vikings victories of all time and why. And then he wants me to discuss the top 5 teachers that I have ever had in elementary, middle school, and high school. And then he wants me to read the Bible, John chapter 3, verse 16. But I'm going to take it a little step further than that, folks. But sports, first of all. Well, I did some research, and I see from the top 5 greatest Viking games of all time. The top 5 greatest games that I'm looking at hope right now, going through, looking for the top 5 Vikings greatest games. And here are the top 5. Number 5, The Miracle at the Met, December 14th, 1980. It was a regular season game against the Cleveland Browns. Now, that, in my opinion, is a pretty good game. The Vikings were trailing by 14 points in the fourth quarter. They needed a win to get the NFC title back then. And they managed to do that, winning 28-23 against the Cleveland Browns in that game that year. Now, The reason why that's one of the greatest games is because it was one of the most crucial games the Vikings ever needed, because the Vikings needed a win to clinch the NFC Center title, which now today is the NFC North Division title. So that, in my opinion, is a pretty good game. But I wasn't around when that game happened. But it was an impressive game nonetheless. Game number 4, the fourth greatest game, another regular season game against Minnesota's rival, the Green Bay Packers. That was a game where we had Randy Moss, one of our greatest wide receivers of all time. And right now, as I'm looking at that game, I'm looking at that, and Minnesota was undefeated 4-0 with the Green Bay Packers in that game on October 5th, 1998. That was about 5 years after I was born. So I was barely a kid I was just a child at the time when that game was played. Nonetheless, though, the Vikings played a heck of a game that Randy Moss made his presence felt. He caught 3 touchdowns for 190 yards in just 5 catches. That's incredible, leading to the Vikings winning 37-24, shifting the power in the NFC North to set the tone for one of the greatest offenses in NFL history. Now, in my opinion, that is a good game. That sounded like a great game, and it was a fantastic game. No doubt about that. And we'll get to Randy Moss later on. That back to the game that he made that name out, known as the Randy Moss out coming out party game, which sounds like to me sounds pretty crazy. Now, the third greatest game the Vikings have ever had was against the San Francisco 49ers on January 9th, 1988. It was a 31-point upset over the 49ers. Now, the specifics of that game, the Vikings were 8-8, entered in that matchup against the dominating Joe Montana-led 49ers squad. Minnesota defense rattled San Francisco pretty good, forcing turnovers and eventually knocking Montana out of the game, which is pretty rough. Wide receiver Anthony Carter had a career game, racking up 227 receiving yards in a stunning 36-24 blowout upset game. Now, in my opinion, that game is pretty good. It is another good game. It is one of the most stunning games I've ever seen in my life, I've ever heard of in my life. I've never seen it because I was never born, because I wasn't born until 5 years later in 93. So that game took place 5 years beforehand. Now, that, in my opinion, some people would say is one of the most incredible games of all time, and so forth. And it was impressive nonetheless. And I have to agree. Those who were alive during that game would probably agree that that would be one of the greatest games of all time, and so forth. Now, on to the second greatest game, the greatest comeback in NFL history. Now, this one I definitely saw on December 17th, 2022, 4 years, just almost 4 years ago. Just almost 4 years ago. That game I saw when our Vikings were down 33-0 against the Indianapolis Colts here in Minnesota. And that was that I was completely stunned. I was completely worried that we weren't going to win that game. But Minnesota rallied and scored 28 unanswered points in the second half, tying the game on a touchdown and 2-point conversion with under 3 minutes left in regulation. And then our kicker, Greg Joseph, I was nervous as hell. I was shaking. My heart was just boom, 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 beating like a pounding sledgehammer and so forth. And our kicker, Greg Joseph, sealed the 39-36 victory in overtime to secure the NFC North title the NFC North title for the Minnesota Vikings. Now that game was the most craziest game I've ever seen in my one of the two most craziest games I've ever seen in my life. By far, that is my number two best game. That is my number two best game of all time. And I agree with that stat. That was the number one greatest of all time. And that was in a regular season game. That was the best game I've ever seen in my life. Now comes the number one of all of them. And I didn't get to see the last moment of this one, but I did see the replay and I was going nuts. I could not believe the New Orleans Saints screwed themselves over in this division game on January 14th, 2018. This was about 8 years ago. 8 years ago. This was crazy. Minnesota was down 24-23 with just 10 seconds remaining in the game with no timeouts. The Vikings had the ball on their own 39-yard line, and quarterback Case Keenum connected with wide receiver Stephon Diggs for a 61-yard walk-off touchdown. That important play made history as the first walk-off touchdown as time expired in an NFL playoff game, sending the Minnesota Vikings to the NFC Championship. I went ballistic. I was like, okay, I'm afraid we just couldn't believe we lost. But then when I got back up to my apartment and I heard that we won with a Minneapolis miracle, I could not believe it. I was shocked. I was shocked. Many people, probably almost any Minnesota Viking fan, were shocked that our team managed to pull off a 61-yard walk-off touchdown against the New Orleans Saints, winning it 29-24. That game was the best number one top-ranked game. And that is my number one, and that's why I have that believe that that game is our number one best of the best game of all time. And I assure you, we will probably never see another Minneapolis miracle like that. Who knows when we'll ever see it again? But it is one of the greatest victories the Vikings have ever pulled off of all time. No one has ever seen that. That's why these these 5 games that I just discussed, are the best games we have ever had in the top 5 games in NFL history. I mean, by far, this is why the Vikings have performed such incredible feats from certain times in their history and managed to come out from the jaws of defeat several times and come out with a Hail Mary victory and come back from a big deficits 1 point, either a 1 point deficit or a 10 point deficit or a 14 point deficit or even a 33 point deficit. The Vikings will pull it together and they will fight for every square inch of field to win a game. That's Viking power right there, folks. And it couldn't be any happier. Now, the top 5 all-time Vikings quarterbacks. And why do these guys the top 5? Well, let's start with number 5, Tommy Cormer. He was a fan favorite draft in the first round in the 1977 NFL draft. 2-minute Tommy spent 13 seasons in purple, earning Pro Bowl honors in 1986 while throwing for 24,775 career yards. That is incredible. And this man was there when he played against the Cleveland Browns in that game that we discussed in our previous discussion just moments ago of that the December 14th, 1980 game against the Cleveland Browns. Now, that is by far as I'm concerned, was incredible. This guy has earned his seat as the number 5th spot because he earned it. He pushed himself to the max, did everything he could. He spent 13 seasons with the Vikings, and he led the Vikings to an incredible season of his career. and he was by far a good quarterback. Now, number 4, Kirk Cousins. Now, during his 6 seasons in Minnesota from 2018 to 2023, Cousins posted the highest passer rating and second most passing yards in team history, earning 3 Pro Bowl nods and leading a 13-win season in 2022. That's incredible. And why is he in this spot? Because he shows that he can get the ball downfield and make stuff happen. I just hope JJ McCarthy can do the same thing with the Vikings. Number 3, Brett Favre. Now, by far, as far as I know, Brett Favre is one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, who played for more than one team. Through his tenure was brief from 2009 to 2010. Favre delivered one of the most memorable seasons in team history in 2009, throwing for 33 touchdowns and 12 interceptions while leading the Vikings to the NFC Championship game, which, by the way, we lost because the refs favored the New Orleans Saints that year. I don't know why. Don't ask me why. But that's just how officials handle things, because they prefer other teams than the Vikings to go to the Super Bowl. That's just how I see things. And that's just how arrogant people can be. But Brett Favre has earned it because of what he did in '09. He made one of the most memorable seasons in his tenure of all time. Now, number 2, Dante Culpepper. Culpepper was a dramatic and explosive playmaker who earned 3 Pro Bowls. His 2004 season was one of the best in franchise history, throwing for 4,717 yards and 39 touchdowns. Now, he's earned that spot. And why is he earned that spot? Because he makes plays. It says he's dynamic, and explosive. That makes him a great player, and he makes plays like anything ever mentioned. Although he and Favre have clashed time to time in his year with the Vikings when he played for the Vikings. When Culpepper was with the Vikings and Favre was with the Packers and so forth. Now, that's how I see it. And those are the 4. Now, number 1, Frank Tarkenton. Frank Tarkenton, the undisputed greatest quarterback in franchise history. Tarkenton played 13 of his 18 seasons played 13 of his 18 NFL seasons in Minnesota, leading the Vikings to 3 Super Bowl appearances, racking up 28,953 passing yards with 191 touchdowns as a Viking. Why does he get the number 1 spot? Because of what he did. He is by far the most undisputed greatest quarterback in the Vikings history. He led the Vikings to 3 Super Bowl appearances: Super Bowl 4, Super Bowl 8, and Super Bowl 9. He did all that, and he put on a great effort in doing so. Although Minnesota never won those 3 Super Bowls, he still led us there, and that's what we should be grateful for, and we should be thankful that he was there when Minnesota needed him the most. And those are the top 5 greatest quarterbacks in Minnesota Viking history. Now, on to the top 5 running backs in Viking history. There is David Osborne from 1965 to 1975. Bill Boom Boom Brown, 1962 to 1974. Robert Smith, 1993 to 2000. Chuck Foreman, 1973 to 1979. And then Adrian Peterson from 2007 to 2016. Let's start with David Osborne at number 5. Now, why is he the 5th best running back the Vikings had? Because he was a key workhorse during the Viking era of Super Bowl appearances in the late 60s and 70s. He rushed for over 4,000 yards, and he is the most memorable player in Minnesota history and a winning culture in Minnesota. That is impressive. as far as I know. I was never there when he was around with the Vikings, nor this next guy, Bill Boom Boom Brown. Now, this guy was a four-time Pro Bowler for the Minnesota Vikings. He was a Brown was the anchor of the Minnesota backfield for over a decade, and he was a four-time Pro Bowler, completed up to over 5,500 yards rushing, ranked among the most durable backs in team history. That is by far the most impressive spot that this man can earn because he proved it, and that's why he's number four. Robert Smith now from 1993 to 2002. So I might have known him, may not have known him, but I was around when I was born when he was with the Vikings and was still around when he was with them. Now, he is the second all-time leading rusher in franchise history with over 6,500 rushing yards. He 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 set four 1,000-yard record seasons in an instrument to set the record-breaking 1998 Vikings offense. That is impressive. That's why Robert Smith has earned the third spot in the Vikings' top five greatest running backs of all time. Now, Chuck Foreman. Now, I may not have been around. I wasn't born when this guy was with the Vikings, but by the sounds of it, this man must have been a real critical piece of the Viking offense in the 1970s. He was highly versatile and very explosive and excellent in rushing and receiving. He his record of over 5,500 yards rushing, 52 rushing touchdowns, and he caught over 300 passes, and was a five-time Pro Bowler and the 1973 NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year. That's impressive, and he deserves this number two spot because he's earned it. That's why Chuck Foreman is number two on the Vikings' greatest running back status of all time. And now we come to the number one man of all time, the greatest running back the Vikings had, the most undisputed greatest running back the Vikings have in franchise history, Adrian Peterson. He holds all major team rushing records during his time in Minnesota. He rushed for over 10,000 yards with 97 touchdowns, and he won three NFL rushing titles, was named 2012 NFL MVP, and rushed for over 2,000 yards in a single season. This is why Adrian Peterson has the number one spot. He is the number one running back the Vikings had ever had from 2007 to 2016. And I watched his games. He's earned that spot. He's earned his place in Viking history and lore and honors and the Vikings Ring of Honor for all time. That's how I see in the Vikings running back as I do with the Vikings quarterback. Now, on to the top five wide receivers of the Minnesota Vikings. We start with number five, Adam Thielen, from 2014 to 2022. Adam Thielen, native Minnesotan from Detroit Lakes, rose from an undrafted practice squad player to a two-time Pro Bowler. He ranks third in franchise history in career receptions of over 540 and fourth in receiving touchdowns of 55, becoming a reliable target for the team. That is incredible, and that is why Adam Thielen is number five on this team's top five receiver list. Now we go to the number four spot, Anthony Carter, from 1985 to 1993. Now this man was a dynamic playmaker in the late 80s, early 90s. Carter was renowned for his speed and big play ability. He amassed over 7,000 receiving yards and 52 touchdowns as a Viking, was a private weapon in Minnesota's run to the 1987 NFC Championship game, which I don't know if we won that game or not, but if we didn't, then we had a good man. And that's why Anthony Carter has earned the fourth place spot. And he's earned it because he did what he could do, because of his dynamic playmaking ability and his incredible speed and big play abilities. Now we go to number 3, the Justin Jefferson, the Jet Jefferson, from 2020 to the present day today. This man is by far, he has been playing for fewer seasons than others on this list. Jefferson has already cemented his spot as one of the greatest to wear the purple and gold. He holds the NFL record for the most receiving yards in a player's first 4 seasons and is already third in franchise history for career receiving yards. That's incredible. And I believe that Justin Jefferson has still a brighter future with the Vikings. And if we keep him, we might have a chance to go to the Super Bowl. But the problem is we're going to have to get our other receivers to step up so that way then those opposing teams' defensive corners and safeties zero in on them along with the linebackers and open up a space for Justin Jefferson to make something happen. Now, on the number 2 spot of this, Randy Moss, the GOAT Randy Moss from 1998 to 2004 and then again 2010. Perhaps one of the most physical dominant receivers in NFL history. Moss holds the franchise records for single season receiving yards of over 1,000 and receiving touchdowns of 17 in his legendary 1998 rookie campaign. His record of 92 receiving touchdowns as a Viking and revolutionized the deep threat role. This is incredible, and this is why Randy Moss is number 2 on this list, because he is one of the most incredible receivers we have. And if Justin Jefferson can match what Randy Moss did in his time as Viking, Justin Jefferson might become one of the greatest receivers we might have, surpassing both Randy Moss and this number 1 player we've had since 1990 to 2002, the one and only Chris Carter. Now, Carter is in the franchise's all-time leading receptions of over 1,000 and receiving touchdowns of 110, a master of the sideline catch and third down conversion. He was an 8-time Pro Bowler and a center figure in the Vikings' high-flying offense of the 1990s. This is incredible. This is a man who has lived up to his reputation, who has earned himself the number 1 spot. And this is why Chris Carter is one of Minnesota's greatest receivers, as the number 1 receiver of all time. And again, if Justin Jefferson plays well and stays healthy and focus and works out a lot, he might just be as great as Randy Moss and Chris Carter put together. And that's how I see in the Vikings incredible season, incredible players, and so forth. Now, I would like to discuss other players, but again, my old high school football coach, Matt Lundin, wants me to answer next. Who are my top 5 teachers and why were they so great, and maybe even do 3 different videos? Honestly, I can't answer that because I had so many great teachers. I can't pick. It's hard to tell. It's just so hard and complicated to tell how and whom or what should I choose as my top 5 greatest teachers of all time. It's just that hard and complicated. And it is by far the best scenario of all time. And I know this is going to be hard for anyone to understand, including my old high school football coach, Matt Lundeen, Aaron Ferrier, and so many others. Even Coach Andy Orata. And I understand that. Now, now about our faith through the Bible. Let me read you some verses. Let me read you some verses here. I'm going to read a verse here from hang on a second. Okay, here we go. I'm going to go to Matthew chapter 23, verse 15 to 22. Whom you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, who you travel over the land and sea to make one hypotosome. Can't pronounce that word, but sorry. And when he becomes one, you make him twice as fit for hell as you are. Who to you blind guides who say, whoever takes an oath by the sanctuary, it means nothing. But whoever takes the oath by the gold of the sanctuary is bound by his oath. Blind fools, for which is greater, the gold or the sanctum that sanctifies the gold? Also, whoever takes an oath by the altar, it means nothing. But whoever takes an oath by the gift that is on it is bound by his oath. Blind people, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Therefore, the one who takes an oath by the altar takes an oath by it and by everything on it. The one who takes an oath by the sanctum takes an oath by it and by him who dwells in it. And the one who takes an oath by heaven takes an oath by God's throne and by him who sits on it. Now, what that is telling us here is that there are a great deal, many more stories to come, and so forth. Therefore, we must look to our stories, and so forth. We must look to and for, and so forth. We must appeal to the word of our faith and the word of our faith in religion and our God. In the name of our Father and of our Holy Spirit, we must abide to the rules of our Father in heaven. Now, to John chapter 3, verse 16 to verse 18. For God loved the world in this way. He gave his one and only Son so that everyone who believes in him will not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world that he might condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. Anyone who believes in him is not condemned. But anyone who does not believe is already condemned, because he is not believed in the name of the one and only Son of God. Now, what that means is that our Father in heaven sent his Son to die on the cross for our sins. And we must not take for granted on that. We must abide to it because he gave his life to atone for our sins. And we must look to our faith and to the Lord Almighty through him and Him alone may we be blessed in the kingdom of heaven. Well, that's it for today, folks. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of Shawn's Point of View. Remember, like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Happy 4th of July, Independence Day.